Hello and welcome to Media 7, where we're joined by a live audience at Auckland's Classic Comedy Club. In this week's show, we examine the implications of two very different news stories. First, the export of jobs in the apparel industry, and then a stabbing at Avondale College that sparked what was, in our view, some poor reporting. But let's not tarry, it's time for Tales of the Rag Trade. The last thing anyone needs in an economic crisis is someone shipping jobs out of the country, right? And when Levin's Swazi Apparel lost a vital $2 million contract with the New Zealand Army, gone to China, the company's owner Davey Hughes proved a popular face with the local media.
Our obligations are to the people of New Zealand. That's what I believe the government should be looking at.
John Campbell did grill the Prime Minister.
So does that suggest that those free trade agreements are, in some respects, flawed?
No, I don't think so.
But the response here has been muted compared to Australia, where Prime Minister Kevin Rudd was summoned to a heavily promoted 7 network TV show to confront tearful Pacific brand staff.
Any job loss in Australia, from my point of view, is one job loss too many.
Pacific Brands also ditched nearly 100 jobs here, and its subsidiary, Yaka, brokered the contract that Swazi has lost. But there's been nothing like the media odium directed at the Pacific Brands executives who loaded the company with debt, as the CEO, Sue Morfitt, tripled her own pay and posed for corporate videos like this.
We have a very strong culture here of feeling like a family, so you actually do step into a work environment where you would feel well looked after, well cared for, but also in an environment where you can care for and look after others.
Things are a bit different now.
We've become a mass market brand goods operator, and we will be sourcing our goods from wherever it is appropriate.
Well, there's only one thing from the company that's going to be exported through these gates or any gates on the wharves, and that's the executive.
No media-savvy protests. And only the faintest of calls for the Prime Minister to bloody well get in and do something. No sense, in short, of national betrayal. So, who's getting it right? Are our news media refusing to surrender to economic populism? Or playing the role of the battered economic spouse? Okay or not okay? We're joined now by the man you saw on screen, Swazi Apparel's Davey Hughes. Alongside him, Helen Kelly, President of the Council of Trade Unions, and on the right, physically and philosophically, National Business Review Editor Neville Gibson. Welcome to you all. Now, Davey, you did pretty well with the media last week. You seem to have a gift for getting in the news. What was your trick?
I think if I was a fisherman, you would have called last week a perfect storm. But I'm a clothing manufacturer, so it was just a bit of coincidence, really. And Kay Blundell from the Dominion, she ran with the story. And then it all just took off from there. It just went crazy. So
news organisations called you rather than the reverse?
Yes, that's right. They got in touch with me.
Were you surprised by that?
I was at first, because I was running at the time and my cell phone went. It was about 5:30 in the morning and people started ringing. I thought, oh, who's calling this early? And it was the radio stations from the South Island, from the North Island, and then TV channels.
So what did they want from you? Did they want a sob story?
I don't think they wanted a sob story, but they wanted to get to the bottom of exactly what had happened. They'd read what was in the Dominion, and they thought there was a good story there that they could follow up. And yeah, sob story, no, but just a good solid story.
And what was the response? Did you actually get much feedback from it?
Response was overwhelming. You know, I've never received 2,000 or 3,000 emails before. You know, the response came from New Zealand, basically, and it was pretty humbling. People ringing up, people wanting to start petitions, people wanting to start stampedes on Parliament. We really got some momentum.
And yet we didn't really see that reflected in the news coverage, did we? There was you, and then it went quiet.
Yeah, I don't think it has gone quiet just yet. You know, one of the interesting things as well was that the Australians picked up on it, and it's still going on. So, you know, there's still a story there.
Helen, what do you make of the coverage of these stories in general? Because we have regrettably seen a few of them. Are they set pieces? Do they all tend to be the same?
Well, I think there's two different ways. They're either reported from the economic perspective in the business sort of newspapers, or they're reported from the sort of human tragedy angle that we see frequently. But what we're not seeing really is any analysis of the different sorts of redundancies that are going on and why that's happening. So outsourcing, for example, the banks sending call centres offshore, that is not recession driven. That is not the sort of story that you might have any sympathy for the employer over.
So why isn't that angle being reported? Is it because you're not being heard?
I think, there's been certainly some media coverage, but I've actually had to clarify with the media. They've often bundled the stories together and said, Sea Lords, for example, is just simply they're productive, shifting jobs onto the ships where there are foreign crews doing that work. And so I do think there needs to be a more sophisticated look at where where businesses are genuinely being affected by the downturn and doing their best, and where, in this sort of instance where actually work is going offshore or there are changes like that occurring.
Neville, what did you make of the reporting of Davey's story? Do you think it was appropriate or overly emotional or what?
Oh, definitely way over the top. It did press two hot buttons at the time though. One is the Buy Kiwi thing, which is economic nonsense and really a waste of taxpayers' money, which a couple of academics at University of Otago discovered. The other one, of course, is on the eve of the Jobs Summit, so it's obviously looked to me like it was set up by the Greens or someone like that. Anyone who thinks the government creates jobs or should save jobs, if it's economic populism, as you mentioned, in Australia, I don't think Australia's going to come through this recession as well as we will.
I don't think the Greens broke a military uniform tendering, do they?
No, they didn't get on.
It doesn't sort of seem in their natural.
This was a bit different, wasn't it?
Was some facts from Davey, or the reporter didn't ask.
What facts?
As to the nature of this contract with Yaka, and Yaka, of course, is quite a big employer here, part of Pacific Brands, and the fact that they then can go wherever they want to fulfil that contract for the army.
Well, but still, I'm still not quite getting what you think should have been reported other than what was.
Well, the nature of jobs, I think Helen's right, the nature of work changes and people are changing jobs all the time. In a recession, you've got a big drop in demand. So obviously, in some of those industries where demand really drops a lot, businesses have to look at how they're going to survive. So
it's a stretch to call this one recession-driven, though, isn't it? It was a public contract going somewhere else.
You mean for the army? Well, it was probably a matter of whether the contract should be done here. It would be a matter of cost to the army, I presume.
No, cost didn't come into it, and that was the interesting thing. And let's get a few facts here as well. Yaka don't exist anymore, and neither does Yassel. Okay, they were both struck off the company's office. We're actually dealing with Pacific Brands, okay. And cost didn't come into it. They said to us that the cost savings would be incredibly marginal, and that it would be more in line with a capacity issue. Now, we hit every deadline on time, every time, and we did it for a really good price.
So what was their motive then?
Exactly. What was their motive? We still haven't heard, but they could not give that contract away without the express sign-off of Defence.
So you're still blaming them for taking away what should be a New Zealand contract, when in fact...
It's not a question of blame, it's a question of me wanting to find out some answers of why this contract went.
Yeah, but the point is that defence procurement, it's taken New Zealand a long time to get into Australia and to the United States and Canada, all of whom see this as a way of protecting jobs within their own countries. So I think the gains from defence procurement by New Zealand suppliers, like Racon say, I think what they add to the economy is greater, than one small clothing business.
Yeah, what do you make of that? Because your bad luck surely is the good fortune of all those companies that want to get into export markets, David.
Yeah, and I don't think we are. Okay, we're a small company when you look at us on a national scale, but 70 jobs in Levin is an awful lot of people, and. For me, it comes down to those 70 people. And Racon, yeah, sure, they're doing a great job, but if you look at the Americans and under their amendments that they've made to their defence procurement, they must procure 100% of their clothing onshore.
Yeah, I know. That's not good.
No, there was
it's not good. It's not the religion, is it, Neville?
Bending to the public demand that they should solve a problem which Yeah, for which there's no easy solution.
You know, to solve problems. But at the Job Summit, there was a lot of support for sorting out the rules around New Zealand procurement, and a feeling that actually New Zealand firms are discriminated against in the way that government jobs are tendered. So actually, while there was a huge amount of capital represented at that Job Summit, there was a lot of support, and there is one of the big 20 ideas is trying to at least make it an even playing field so that New Zealand companies, especially small businesses who, you know, might want to buy tender for bits of procurement contracts, are able to do that and win them where they're able to compete.
And I have to say that wasn't a story that was prominently reported out of the Jobs Summit. That's
Not
news
at
to
all.
me.
Yeah.
Is this a story we need to actually hear? A discussion we need to
Yeah,
have?
I've been surprised about the reporting at the Job Summit. You know, there's been a lot of focus on some of the bigger ideas like the 9-day fortnight, and even that I don't think's been reported very well. But there's a lot of ideas, and some of them quite worrying as well, like things like, you know, a freeze on all rulemaking is one of the major 20 ideas. I don't know if it'll get legs or not, but procurement was certainly a big project and seems to have some buy-in and is going to be developed.
But Helen, you've spent the last 9 years working with the Labor government to make employment more expensive, so you can't have it the other way around. Suddenly,
fair, I think, is the term.
I know, but it's still more expensive for employers, the Holidays Act, and
Yeah, but what you're hearing here
cafes
is
can't open on public holidays unless they pay double rates.
Did you report that aspect of the Jobs Summit in NBR level? Because I'm getting the impression this is a discussion that we haven't had around whether New Zealand firms should be first in line for certain elements of...
It's a big issue, because it's not just in clothing. You can understand that it can be done better and cheaper in China because of the labour costs and a lot of other things. But in areas like, say, health IT, we've got companies here that do world-class stuff, and their main markets are international. But when they go knocking on the door of local government here, they say, we don't want to know about it. We'd prefer to buy something from Denmark or wherever.
I'm glad you mentioned IP, because that for me was another issue, because we put so much IP into the Army's wet weather gear, and that's gone as well.
Yeah, what I was talking about was the IT is software. And that's
IT, oh sorry, I thought you said IP.
But that's a good point too, because a lot of companies here are very successful, but they have to test the markets overseas in order to become successful. And these are the companies that aren't being reported that are doubling the number of staff they've got.
But what you're saying is it's not actually blasphemy to have that discussion in the media about the rights of New Zealand firms under procurement processes.
No, there's a composting outfit in Hamilton that's finding it very difficult to sell its product in New Zealand, yet it's adopted widely overseas. And there's a lot of others where the sniffing technology from SIF Technologies is adopted by the whole of Australian customs. Do you think there's one installed in New Zealand? No.
That's the way the port market's set up, though, isn't it? The people that own the port don't open the containers, and the sniffing technology is for the containers. That's free market, I think they call that.
No, it's not.
Market
it's regulation and bloody-mindedness.
The other story that came and was, as we mentioned in that setup, was the 100 jobs lost here under Pacific Brands, which is a fraction of what there was in Australia. That was over 1,800. Should that story have been reported differently?
Well, I think it was reported differently in Australia because the management were there, and obviously they became a focus, and they had support from the government, and they were sponsoring fashion parades and, you know, all of that sort of thing. But yes, I think there should have been more investigation to what happened here in Pacific Brands, and also, you know, sometimes it'd be interesting to think about what could be done. And these companies, they shut so suddenly. They must know when things are going wrong and when things are changing. And what we're been advocating, and this is another thing the media haven't really looked at, is how you treat workers in transition from one job to another. New Zealand's very poor at that. They tend to, you know, keep the company secret and then dump people. And so there are, you know, in other economies, really good methods for shifting workers onto the next job. The media don't really look at whether redundancy is the only option and job loss is, you know, is the only consequence.
Davey, how do you feel about Pacific Brands? Because they would appear to have played a role in what's happened to you.
Yeah,
would you have liked to have seen them hauled over the coals?
Well, yeah, perhaps pulled over the coals. I mean, strangely enough, I feel sorry for them, you know, and you know, they're running extremely high debt levels. You know, their equity value is pretty low. Their management's taking a bit of a battering, but even more so, their workers are taking a huge battering, especially those 1,850 jobs that have been lost. I hope that they can pull through it, simply because, hey, you know, they're now making the New Zealand's Army's wet weather gear, and if they fall over strategically, what will happen to our Army?
Well, we'll take a break now, but after the break we'll get on to the issue of exactly how much blame we should lay on Pacific Brands, and we'll meet again soon.